Hi everybody. Today we're taking another look at Norad, and this is a classic tabletop game contained in STC's Conflict magazine, issue number 4, first published in 1973. Mishler Company revised and reprinted the game in 1977, but today we're focusing on the original version, although I will consider and demonstrate some minor add-ons and adjustments that I use with my set that I think heighten the overall experience of the game. Most of the extras featured in this video are listed as options in the base rules. However, I feel all of them should be incorporated into regular play if you want the best experience with this obscure, fun title. So I'll take a minute to provide some context with respect to my personal exposure to Norad, since it's so fringe nowadays. Most people have probably never heard of it. I got it secondhand off eBay 15 years ago, at least. It was already removed from the book, so I didn't get the magazine itself. But that's okay, because I noticed the rules were printed right on the map. The reason why it caught my attention in the first place was the graphic design of the map. Remind me of the 1983 movie War Games, and for many years I actually had the game map tacked on my wall for decoration, and it was always a great conversation piece. The theme nuclear war, the post-apocalyptic genre, I find fascinating, super interesting. Anything remotely related to that, in fact. At the time, it was inexpensive, and the rules sounded simple, so I picked it up, and I'm glad I did. It's a very fun, unique little game. Let me show you how it works. So the first thing you need to know about the game is that it's actually a bluffing guessing game. So there's no dice at all. One person plays North America, blue, the defender. The other person plays USSR, red, the attacker. The game is basically trying to simulate a final retaliatory and nuclear strike by the Soviet Union against America after USA wipes out Russia. The game kind of just assumes this scenario unfolds. And the best a red player can hope for is to destroy the West in kind to achieve Armageddon. So that's how they win. So to kill the West officially, the Soviets have to nuke 100 points worth of North American cities. Some cities are worth more than others. For example, Washington, D.C., 9 points. St. Louis, 5 points. If NORAD prevents 100 points worth of total destruction from happening, they win. Oh, by the way, the game is set in the early 1960s, so this was before long-range MIRVed ICBMs were a thing. So nothing like that was available at the time. The main delivery systems were still heavy strategic bombers, specifically Tu-16 Badgers for the USSR. In this scenario, 30 of them are available. 24 are live, 6 are decoys. So the first thing that happens in this game is the Soviet player assigns city targets to specific numbered bombers. The number IDs are on the back of the bomber units. The bomber destinations are locked in. They can't be altered after the game starts. The Russian player can assign multiple bombers to individual cities, however, if they want to really make sure to destroy certain targets. All it takes is for a single armed bomber to arrive over target, city space, and you flip the bomber counter over to reveal a mushroom cloud and record the numerical value of the destroyed city onto a score sheet. It sounds easy enough. In theory, it is, but in practice, it isn't. So simple. North American Air Defense Command has something to say about the defense of the continent. The West actually sets up first after the Soviet player declares that they have their secret locked-in targeting solution. They also have to specify a flight path for each bomber, either polar cap route or continental route, or rather where they will enter the map. The USA places all their units face down on city spaces. There are no stacking limits for NORAD units, whereas the Russian bombers cannot be stacked. Only one bomber per space is allowed. The Americans get 12 fighter units. These represent some of the Century Series interceptors like F-102s, F-106s. Plus they get 4 decoy interceptors in addition to 5 ground-to-air missile batteries. That's all. So unfortunately, America can't cover everything. Some bombers will get through. And yet the hope and expectation is that damage will be limited to the extent that whatever's left of America is enough to eventually recover from Russia's nuclear strike. Turn sequence and gameplay is straightforward. The Soviet player goes first. They must activate at least 4 bombers each turn. Bombers may move up to 4 spaces, but the least they can move is 2 spaces toward their designated target. Moves may be made diagonally. Bombers can never backtrack due to limited fuel. Bombers must stop momentarily over any missile unit. If a NORAD unit does not fire back, like the American player believes the bomber might be a decoy, the bomber may drop a nuclear bomb or continue on its way. And just in case you're wondering, all the NORAD defensive units are single-shot opportunities. Automatic kills if they reach a bomber. Like I said before, the bombers can only attack their designated target cities, but they also destroy everything else in the same space, such as decoy fighters, live fighters, or unused anti-aircraft batteries when they drop a bomb. And that's the main problem for the blue player. You can't effectively allow many Russian bombers to end their turns within 4 spaces of any city. You could lose defensive assets on the ground that way. So you're always thinking, I got to use this fighter right now or lose it. The interceptors are only active on the Norad player's turn. You can move each one up to 6 squares range per turn. They automatically remove a bomber when they intercept. But they are also used up and removed from play when they do. Missile units also only kill 1 bomber before they're used up, but you can put more than 1 in a city. One interesting feature on the map is the polar early warning dew line. The Soviet player can knock it out of action if they successfully nuke both Anchorage and Gothab. After Norad loses their early warning detection capabilities, the Soviet player can start all of their polar route bombers on row H. So this is way closer to American cities. And this all but dooms defensive units stationed in Canada, unless they're all used up on the very next turn. So Edmonton, Quebec City, Vancouver, several 5-point cities instantly become more vulnerable to attack. And that's the basic setup right there. That's the game. But wait, there's more. For additional fun and chaos, you may allow for up to 5 Russian bombers to launch from Cuba. If you play with this option, no more than 3 Cuban-based bombers may be live, and no more than 2 may be decoys. They are supposed to represent IL-28 Beagles. In case you're wondering, this variant makes a huge difference because no less than 7 major U.S. cities are instantly threatened by a strike based out of Cuba. All of Florida, South Texas, high-value cities like Houston become extra vulnerable. You can also play an advanced game that adds even more red and blue units. The defenders can add a few Canadian units, missiles, and fighters. The missiles are supposed to represent Beaumark missiles, and I like to imagine the Canadian interceptors are supposed to be Avro arrows. The Canadian contingent simply consists of 3 interceptors plus 1 decoy interceptor plus 1 live bomber missile site and 1 decoy missile site. All of these units are placed face up in Canadian cities at the start of the game. If you add Canadian units, then the Russian player gets to deploy a handful of sub-launched missiles. They are supposed to be Zulu 5 submarines. The Russian subs are handled a bit differently than everything else. They are abstractly represented by simple missile counters. To use a submarine launched missile, red player simply places a missile counter beside any coastal city. Norad player gets 1 turn to decide whether or not to intercept the sub. On the Soviet player's next turn, if the Norad player does not expend an interceptor on the sub's missile strike destroys the adjacent city, assuming the sub is not a decoy. Game comes with 5 sub counters, 2 are live, 3 are decoys. I always play the advanced rules with Cuba, with Canadian units, and Russian subs. As far as mods and adjustments are concerned, there are a few minor ones I like and use. So speaking of the submarines, as you might imagine, they are a nightmare to manage for the West. If one surfaces off the coast of New York, are you really going to gamble it's just a decoy by not reacting? Now times that by 5. And I know only 2 are live threats, but still, how do you know? How do you know unless by expending valuable defensive resources, which ones are the death dealers? So I came up with a fun variant for the Russian subs that make them potentially more manageable. A long time ago, I bought a set of odd dice, like a D5, D7, D9s, and weird ones like that. So I said, hey, why not make use of the D5? The red subs in this game could use some further variability, as powerful as they are in this game. So I say at the beginning of the game, the Soviet player rolls 1d5 blindly. It draws that many sub-counters from a cup. That way they may get 3 decoys only. But even still, you just know the American player has to respond wherever they surface. So I feel a tiny bit of randomness may go a long way here for game balancing purposes. And that's it for the rules modifications. Component upgrades. Yeah, first I created a 1-page, easy-to-read rule summary. I always do this. For my games, you don't want to be squinting at the fine print on the map edges if you need clarification about how something works. You can 1-page summarize the entire game, in this case, very easily. Second, I made a score sheet for the Russian player. It looks like this. It has spots to record the target cities for each bomber. You circle the P if it's flying the polar route. There's also a list of cities on the sheet. You cross off the names as you go, adding them to your total score. The sheet serves as a cool game record as well. Anyway, I uploaded it to BGG, so feel free to download it anytime you play this game if you want. I also found pictures online of the backs of the Mishler 1977 edition units. I noticed they're sharper and have better images and details than the earlier SDC units. So you can see I just applied the higher quality backs to my standard units. And lastly, the map. I PDF'd the Mishler map. I printed it off in sections and then laminated it because the original fold-out one didn't hold up over time. There were creases, of course, and pooching on the table, like it wouldn't lie nice and flat naturally. But worst of all, the ink actually faded like crazy. Of course, it didn't help that I had it hanging on my wall for a number of years, but still, I mean, it was insane fade. And not only the black parts, the red city numbers actually vanished completely over time. That was really weird. And just a quick aside, I remember one of my friends who was a serious comic book collector said, of course, that happens with comics too, especially ones with a lot of solid black on the cover. Never display them on a wall exposed to sun. Apparently, they will degrade super fast, and that's why old comics with lots of black on the covers go for a lot of money in mint condition, apparently. Anyway, luckily, Norad is old school enough nowadays that if you really want to play it, you could, even without buying it. If you're down with the whole print and play exercise, all pertinent materials may be found online if you are so inclined. Additionally, I must mention that if you want the other half of the story, Norad may be paired with Strategic Air Command, and this is an expansion or standalone title which came out in 2020, I believe. So I'm looking to get that someday soon, and I hope to have an opposed game that combines the two. When I do, I'll make a session report review video. Overall, though, I feel this game is worth a try, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. The action is fast and tense. When as the allies you intercept a decoy, it's like, you feel it because you know one of your cities is going to go up in smoke over a bad guess, potentially. And although it may be very difficult for the bad guys to actually score 100 points, they will have their moments. And it is morbidly satisfying to place a mushroom cloud on the map for the USSR player. The whole experience tells a rather unique story. Much of the action tends to take place over the eastern seaboard. However, other targets of opportunity seem to factor into the equation, and fake-outs and surprises happen every game. There aren't too many games out there that let you nuke Quebec City or Winnipeg. So if you have a black sense of humor and like guessing games with a nuclear war theme, consider Norad. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more content coming soon.